Hi, we're here to finish up our unit on the Renaissance and Reformation. Today we want to look elsewhere around the world. What was going on in other places of the planet while Europe was experiencing this rebirth and Reformation of the church. We're going to do things a little bit different today. We're going to actually look at the notes very specifically, and I'm going to tell you exactly what to underline and why it's important. So it might take a little time, but here we go. It was business as usual. Underline that around the world. We were still dealing with empires. We're still in that one person in charge and trying to gain unity through power and strength there. The Ottomans, more specifically, Byzantine Empire was declining. Underline that. They had been replaced by the Seljuks, who had been destroyed by the Mongols. Circle Seljuks, circle Mongols. Those guys had replaced the Byzantine strength in the area. The Ottomans were a small Turkish state. Circle Turkish state. So people who were Mongols were just like culturally and ethnically the people who live in Turkey today. Turks saw themselves as Ghazis. Circle the word Ghazis. Warriors for Islam. So they had converted to this faith of Islam, and they had established themselves as a state according to that. Their success was built on gunpowder. Underline the word gunpowder there. Put a box around gunpowder. Their horse warriors had converted from using bows and arrows to using guns. They even used cannons. Artillery was something that was kind of new to this part of the world. They were also a gunpowder empire, not only because they were using guns and gunpowder, but because they flashed and developed very quickly, kind of like an explosion. Let's see. Orkan the First declared himself Sultan. Circle the word Sultan. That means he was in charge of a lot of different varieties of people. We're starting to get into an empire position here. They treated people well that they conquered. Circle the word tolerant. They were tolerant of diversity. If you were a Muslim, you had to serve, but if you were, circle the word non-Muslim, you had to pay a tax. Underline the word tax. This might be a reason to convert to Islam. And one feature we'll find of the Ottoman Empire is that as time grew and they went to new places, Islam would replace the religion of the people simply because they wanted perhaps easier access to the power structures of the empire. It says Ottoman rise briefly halted in the 1400s by Timur the Lame, also known as Tamerlane. Ottomans took advantage of his eastern focus, and they were back to expanding, it said, as far as the Balkans. Mehmed II would take Constantinople in 1453, really ending the reign of the Byzantines, and you could say ultimately bringing to a close the whole Roman Empire saga there. They renamed the city Istanbul. Selim the Grim, which is just really fun to say, would expand their empire further. You can see taking it to places like Syria, Pakistan, North Africa, even into Mecca and Medina. Circle, underline, big star, box around, Suleiman the Lawgiver. He would rule for 46 years. Big star, great military leader. Okay, control trade, circle trade, naval force, underline naval force, highly structured social system, law code. Been talking about that from a way to bring consistency to an empire's legal system. Law code, huge there. Efficient bureaucracy, you should recognize that as another sign of effective empire building. Slaves would staff the palace. Janissaries were the elite guards. This was the heart of the war machine of the Ottoman Empire. These Janissaries would be trained from very early ages. Young boys throughout the empire would be, some would say kidnapped, captured. Others would say be offered to the Ottomans for the prestige that went along with that. Freedom of worship of other faiths. Suleiman was a Renaissance man. He had many talents. After Suleiman, many future sultans, and this is where empires kind of go wrong, in trying to keep power from being taken from them, sometimes emperors will suppress future successors, and this would be the case here. the throne would be weakened. Even though the empire itself would not dissolve until after World War I is over, early 20th century, it never would be the same. In fact, by the 1800s, it was often referred to as the old man of Europe there. All right, moving on. The Safavids. This is a Shiite Muslim dynasty. Circle Shia Muslim. This is one of the two sects of Islam. They would be in Persia, underline Persia, and you can see the dates there. Great example of cultural blending. Circle cultural blending. Okay? They would combine Persian, Ottoman, and even Arab cultures. A lot of reasons they're listed. Please note those. Blending may impact things like language, religion, government, technology. Again, a list there of examples. The golden age of Safavid here would come under Shah Abbas. Circle Shah Abbas. He took the throne in 1587. He would reform military and civilian life. Okay, so two of the main features of society for the Safavids, he attacked them and tried to make them more effective and efficient. Punished government corruptions, underline that. Promotion was based on competence, yet there's another example of effective bureaucracies. If you want to get higher up in the authority, you've got to be good at your job. They used foreigners for effectiveness. They didn't try to shut their doors to people who were not like them. There's religious tolerance again, circle that. Many diverse peoples, circle that. Successors to Abbas found difficulty due to incompetence. Another example of why empires fail is because of incompetent leadership. Turn the page, or actually for me turn the page, for you just look at the other side. The Mughals, here we are, we're in India again, South Asia. Okay, empires in India were few and far between. We'd only talked about a few here. The Guptas had crumbled by the 400s. Put a star beside warlike Muslims of Central Asia began invading and raiding here in the 700s. And there were many clashes between Muslims and Hindus. Circle Muslims and Hindus together. They have been populating this part of the world for centuries and have not been getting along for just that same amount of time, seemingly. The attacks made them very weak. There's Timur the Lame was destroying New Delhi by the late 1300s. The Mughals would be brought to the region by a leader named Babur, who is the descendant of both Timur the Lame, a great conqueror, and of course, wait for it, Genghis Khan. So he's probably got it in his bloodline to be a conqueror. We'll come here in the early 1500s. He was a brilliant general. Circle brilliant general. That's a good way to get your foot in the door when it comes to empire building. Just beat everybody else. The height of this empire, though, the Mughals, will be under his grandson Akbar. Akbar, which stands for great, or translated as great, is going to rule India with great wisdom and tolerance, you can see, for almost 50 years. Military was a strength, underline military power, because that's not going anywhere. And you can see the different things that they would do with their military to make it strong. But they would rule a land of at least 100 million people. Circle 100 million people. The cultures were blended in order to keep power over this amount of people. They would welcome influences of other cultures. Underline influences of other cultures. The language of the court was Persian, but they're not in Persia. The language of the people was Hindi. So there may have been some disconnect there, and you're going to see that being a problem later as the rulers lose connection with the people they're ruling over. And there's development of another language here, a blend really between Persian and Hindi. From the soldiers here on the back, from a variety of backgrounds, and you can see that Urdu today is still spoken in Pakistan. Government through bureaucracy, circle that whole phrase, government through bureaucracy, using tax policies that were fair and affordable. Land policies, though, maybe not so good, and you can read that why they weren't. If you knew that you couldn't pass your land down to future generations, you might not work as hard because they would take your land from you. After Akbar's death, the court would change. You can see several of his sons who came into power and what they did good and bad. Some poor leadership, some attention to their own personal objectives instead of what the people needed. Pay attention there to the Shah Jahan, who would build the Taj Mahal, one of the greatest architectural works of all time. While he was building something so beautiful, however, a circle that people were suffering famine, and the lack of infrastructure support with high taxes was definitely a problem for down the road. So the Mughal Empire, as it's closing here, is going to definitely be ripe for the picking, and about this time is when the British show up and will dominate the region with their economic policies, with companies like the British East India Company definitely using the resources there for their own benefit. So that's it. Renaissance Reformation done. We are ready to test, right? Thanks.